Hi, I'm Jason Mefford, and I am with Brad Miller. And today we're going to talk about the power of words, right? I did my funny little voice to make Brad laugh there, right? Anyway, before we talked about the power and the sound of silence, but we thought it would be interesting to talk about words, right? So Brad, do you want to kind of lead us
Yeah.
in, because you've been kind of thinking about this last week? And
Yeah. So this is something that kind of came up actually as a result of our discussion last week, um, where we're talking about silence. And you had mentioned that you were kind of reading a book called The Power of Silence. And it's a book that I had read before, and it's one that I have. And so kind of when you said that, something kind of said to me, yeah, you know what, Brad, you ought to try reading that too. Go back and go through that again. It had been a couple, I don't know how long ago, a year maybe since I've read it. So I went and I finished the book that I was working on and started reading that one. And just the idea of the power that you have with your words and being careful with your words is when it was kind of started coming to mind. And that's something that's kind of been on my kind of been the forefront for me this week. And so um kind of thought that might be something interesting to go to counter the sound of silence from last week with the power of words this week. um
yeah,
you know as lawyers particularly, I kind of understand the importance of words. I know we've got at least probably one other lawyer that may be listening to this. But for us, words are important. It's what we do, it's what we live with. Our job is to use words, to talk, to write, to communicate to a judge, a jury, opposing counsel, our clients, whomever. And so I think we get the idea that words are powerful, that they're important, that you have to be careful with the words that you use, because one word can mean one thing, and if you say something a different way, it can mean something completely different. I don't know how often we kind of sit there and agonize over getting the right word, the perfect word to use in something maybe we're writing. Because we will make sure have this particular meaning gets across to whoever the audience is, the judge, the jury, or whoever we're talking to. And so on the kind of normal everyday, we'll call 3D level, I think as lawyers, as professionals, we get that words are important and that there is some power behind what you say. But the power of words go beyond just communicating with other people. And they go into how you communicate with yourself. In fact, that's one of the most important places where you use your words. And one of the places where I think that we don't really consider it an awful lot. I think this is an area that I've don't really think about, or haven't thought about anyway. But how those words, the words that I'm saying, the words that I'm thinking to myself, how that actually impacts me.
well, I think it's interesting because I don't know if you know this, but I'm also a poet. So
I didn't know it.
you
So
didn't know it. You didn't know it, and so we have to be a little punny here about that.
Mhm.
But especially in things like poetry and writing in general, right? Because I'm a writer as well. Um, Words have power, right? The choice of a particular word that you choose to use can have power as well, right? And so the words that we choose to use are important. And like you said, for a lot of different reasons. I mean, we could talk about this for hours. So we're probably gonna have to break it up into more than one episode. But I think, what's interesting is maybe first we talk about, English in general, right? Which is the language that we're using here, is a really funny language, right? So we have a lot of words that are spelled different, but that are pronounced the same way. We have a lot of words that can mean different things, right? I mean, that's a lot of comedy is based on things like that, using a lot of these words in different ways, because it can be kind of funny how it comes out, right? And so there are certain words that have been kind of dropped from our language. They're still in the dictionary, but nobody really uses them, or nobody really thinks about the epistemology behind the words and what they really mean. And I just used a really big word there. That's a $10 word, Brad. So come on, hand it over.
I'm sorry. Do you take plastic?
Yeah, I do. No, but because one of my stepsons is an English teacher, and so what he does for fun is he looks up the etymology of words, and
different strokes for different folks, I guess.
I know, yeah. So it's really interesting when you go back and you start learning about some of the etymology behind some of the words, other languages that they came from, and what they actually mean. And so a word like integrity, right, that we use, but we don't use as much, right? I mean, we talk about it a little bit, but instead we use words like morality and ethics and other stuff, but it's not the same as the word integrity. And the word integrity, right, means wholeness, means being complete, right? But a lot of times, again, when we use that word, we don't necessarily think of that definition. And another word that you brought up that was talked about in the book, that is a word we don't use very much as well, is impeccability, or being impeccable with your word, right? Which is important in what we're talking about here. And again, we're talking about spirituality. And so again, it's not just 3D picking the right word to tell the judge or the jury that you're right to get the outcome that you want, but it's picking the right word for yourself, right, to be able to get the outcome you want, right? And because there are, so I'll give you an example. Last night I was on a video call like this with some friends, and we were talking about some different things. And if I say, because we were talking about like moving our attention, when you get kind of the monkey chatter going on in your brain, and you're wanting to go back to the silence, like we were talking about in a previous episode, one thing that I have started to do is I tell myself something in my mind usually, but if I need to, I guess I say it out loud, right, to make the point further. And we can talk about thoughts versus sound as well, as we go through here. But so I decided to start doing this with myself. And of course, my first knee-jerk reaction was to say something like, I'll worry about that later. Okay, so Brad's smiling, right? So I was trying to find some statement, right, to say, look, monkey chatter, go away. I'll deal with that later, right? And so my first knee-jerk reaction was, I'll worry about that later. So what's wrong with using those words, Brad?
Well, you're telling yourself that you're going to be worrying about it, or there's something to be worried about.
It's something to be worried about, right? Because I use that word worried, it means, okay, I'm not going to worry about it right now, but I'm going to worry about it in the future. Now, is that the power that I want to put into it? No, right? It's not the kind of energy that I want to infuse into the universe, into myself, right? So another way of saying it, like, I'll take care of that later, would be better, or it's already taken care of. I don't even need to worry about it. I don't even need to think about it. It is already taken care of. So again, you can see even just in that short little thing, there's a big difference in the power based on the particular word that we choose to use.
Yeah, and in the one sense, you're saying, what, this is a problem, this is something to be worried about later, or even that this is something to be thinking about, that it's worth pondering over or kind of concerning myself, versus the third one where it's not even a thing for me anymore. Like it's done, it's taken care of. It's, we're moving on to something else.
Yeah, I don't even have to place any of my attention on it,
Right.
right? Because it's already taken care of. And there's a huge difference in the energy and the power that comes from that, right? I mean, again, I'm just going to kind of role play a little bit, right? Is this is kind of how it would seem if I said these things, right? Oh, I'll worry about that later, versus it is already taken care of. See the difference? Right? I mean, even in the way that I say it, in the tone that I use, in the power behind my voice when I use it, totally different.
Mhm.
Right? So, again, everybody that's listening, what words are you using that you maybe should stop using, or choose other words to say? Another one that a lot of people get into often is using the word don't, right? And the hard part is that happens to be a word that our subconscious like skips over. And so if you say, I don't do this, right, then what are you going to do? You're going to do that, right? It's the old thing, like, don't think of a pink elephant. Oh, what happens immediately, right?
Right. Yeah. You have to
Pink
think of the
elephant
pink
pops in.
elephant to be
Yeah.
able to not think about it. Like your mind, first of all, thinks about it, and then it's got to try to figure out, like, how do I not think? Like, yeah, it doesn't work. So,
Mhm. Yeah, so it's interesting. And this is actually I mean, this whole idea of the power of words is a much, much deeper, multi-level uh, discussion as well. And I think we talked about lyrics before on here, right? That
if we
I
have it, now's a great time to
Now's a great
start.
time anyway, right? I mean,
Sure.
I love music. I use music as a way to receive messages from the universe. And when I look at the lyrics to a song, depending on the situation that I happen to be in at that point in my life, those lyrics will mean something different to me. And the reason for that is, again, a lot of times language is encoded. And so it's the same thing like with poetry or other stuff like that, right? I mean, lyrics are effectively poetry set to music. And so the same phrase can mean something completely different depending on your level of evolution, depending on the circumstances that you happen to find yourself in at that particular time, right? And so, again, one of the songs that's been in my head a lot recently is Midnight Train to Georgia. It's a great song. Great song. Love the song. But the first line of that is LA proved too much for the man. Now, again, depending on who you are and what situation you happen to be in, it's like, oh, that's nice. It's part of the story, right? There's this guy that lived in LA, and for whatever reason, he kind of came out there and he was going to be this big superstar, and things didn't work. And so he decided to hop on a midnight train. He bought a one-way ticket to go back home to Georgia because that's where he is. And it's a really nice song about this lady who's saying, hey, I really like this guy, so I'm going to go get on the midnight train with him because I'd rather be with him than be without him. And so it's a beautiful little romantic song, and I just love it, right? There's people that can listen to the song that way. That's probably true. I mean, whoever wrote the song, there is probably, I mean, it kind of tells a story,
Mm.
right? But to me, who I am in my circumstance in life right now, that
Your life
line,
context.
it provides a different context. And so LA proved too much for the man means something different to me because of that context, right? And so again, that's why words can actually change their meaning based on the context or the answers that you're looking for as well, right? Which again is part of the spiritual practice in trying to look for the signs, look for the ways that the universe is trying to communicate with you, right? Because it's trying to communicate to you, but you're also trying to co-create something. And so your words literally create things.
Right now,
Okay.
that's pretty deep. Now, I think probably we should explain what that means, that concept is.
Okay. So uh there's a Bible verse, I think it's in John, I think it's John 1:1 or something like that. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, if you just read that, it's like, what the fuck does that mean? It's a little like, woo, right? Okay. But when you come to realize that everything in the universe has energy, everything resonates at a specific frequency and vibration, everything gives off a sound, and in fact, universes and everything are created through sound. Now, all of a sudden, you start to realize, whoa, those words maybe really are important, right? If universes are created with sound, if our bodies function using sound, if everything around us is resonating and vibrating at a particular frequency and sound, maybe there's something to the words we use and the way in which we say those words that also create, or on the flip side, because if words can create, words can destroy. And so if you're not getting what you want out of life, maybe you're using some words that are destroying or blocking what it is that you want, because you're not using the right words in the right way.
Yeah, no, that's like, and going back to your example earlier about the um worrying about it later. I mean, you're creating worry because you are saying, I'm gonna worry about it another time. You know, yeah, it's
Now, and this is one thing that I learned this morning listening to a video, and it makes total sense too, is a lot of these sounds we can't perceive with our physical ears.
Mhm.
Right? Because below like 20 hertz, we can't hear with our human ears in in the structure that we're in currently in our bodies that most people are in. Okay. We can't hear below 20 hertz. We can't hear above like 20,000 hertz. So that's why things like a dog whistle, when you blow a dog whistle, we can't hear it, but the dogs go crazy, right? Because the dogs can actually hear it. And so this is something that is amazing when you think about it. As you breathe in, as you breathe this air outside into your body, you're breathing air into your lungs, right? It goes down your mouth, down into your lungs through all these little aioli or whatever they're called, ends up,
I think that's oil. That's a garlic aioli. I think is
oh,
what that
aioli
is.
is a garlic. See, I'm using the wrong word.
I think
Anyway,
avioli or something along that line,
avioli,
maybe.
I don't know. I can't remember what it exactly is called.
Doctors, if we have any of you on here, anyone that actually knows this, please send us a message or comment on this episode and let us know exactly what word that we're messing up and we're looking for here.
There.
So.
But anyway, you guys get the idea, right? The air comes in, but literally as you are breathing in, your body is making a sound and cleansing the air before it gets to your arteries and sends that oxygen out into your body. We can't hear it, but it's happening every time you breathe in and you breathe out. So that's another example, right? Where it's like sound is everywhere. And so again, the words that you use, whether you're thinking them or especially if you say it out loud, right? If you say something out loud and you declare something out loud, there is more power to that. Right. And so again, like I think we've talked about mantras and some other things before, right? Perfectly fine to do them in your head, because the thoughts that you have are still resonating and going out in the universe. Right. But there's a difference between in your mind saying, I am competent, I am competent, I am confident, I am confident, versus saying, I am confident, I am confident, I am confident. Right. There's more power behind it when you say it out loud. You can yell it, you can scream it, you can do it at particular frequencies, which maybe we'll talk about later.
That's a different
Because
episode.
that's a different episode, but certain frequencies. So if you go back to like the Eastern traditions with mantra chanting, a lot of those mantras are chanted at a particular frequency, because not only the word, but the frequency at which you are doing it has an impact, right? And like I said, we'll probably get into that later, but we don't want to overpower everybody, and we can't give you everything in a half hour or 45-minute
Right. Yeah. And I'm still
episode.
trying to figure out how we know that about our breath making a sound, cleansing air and things coming through. Like that's still like, how do we know that that's happening if we can't hear it?
Well, do you have to know that it's happening, or can you just feel that it's happening?
I don't know if I can feel the breath cleansing inside me though. Like I can feel taking the breath, but
Can you imagine it?
well, sure. I have a very good imagination. I can imagine many things.
Right. So to me, it's one of those examples of, just like your chakras or other stuff, that as we're imagining those things happening, they happen. Because that's the thing, is that we're all creators. And so whatever you're thinking, whatever you're saying is happening, because you are creating it somewhere in the universe. A little scary to think about, especially if you're calling yourself a piece of shit or something like that. but yeah, I mean, that is why there is power in words. Power,
So yeah,
power, power.
still going through that whole
So
breath thing, but
well, you're get out of the analytical, Brad, right?
there you go. That's right. That's
Because see,
right.
that's the problem, is we
Mhm.
want to try to understand everything analytically, and you can't analytically explain a feeling. It just is, right?
Very true. Yeah.
And so again, as I could have sat there as I was learning about this, right? It was another puzzle piece for me based on some other things that I've learned. And when I heard that, I felt the truth of it.
Puzzle pieces kind of all of a sudden,
All
there
of
they
a
went.
sudden went, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I know that is what's happening. And so to me, it's a beautiful thing to think about, especially if you're working or you're doing breath work, right? Is to sit there and imagine and be grateful for this amazing body that we have. I mean, honestly, it's like, how fucking cool is that? Right? That your body does all of these things and is able to heal itself. I got a little like rash thing that kind of, I scratched it and I shouldn't have scratched it. And you know what happens when you scratch that. So it got a little infected, right? And so I'm helping it by putting some antibiotic ointment on it. But it's amazing every day to sit there and look at how my body has healed itself just from the previous day, right? I mean, I get up in the morning, I put a Band-Aid on it, with the ointment, and then at night I take it off so it can breathe. And it's just amazing what happens in the course of one day, right? That, I mean, so again, like something like that with breath work, right? Thinking about the breath coming in, thinking about it being cleansed and your body, doing what it needs to do to help take out the toxins, the whatever else that it might be, to provide you with that pure oxygen to be able to flow through your bloodstream to then, nourish all of the cells in your body. Wow. I mean, just sit there and think about the visual or imagine the visual of that happening. It's amazing, right? And that's another way, as we talked about before, connectedness. You're connecting with your body, you're grateful for your body, you're connecting with the air and everything else is going on in that, and you can't help but feel gratitude and peace when you do that.
Yeah. No, I just sitting here thinking about it and kind of taking in everything kind of gives the same feeling, that feeling of peace.
Mhm. I mean, I feel more peaceful just from saying that,
Mhm.
right? Because again, I mean, as we're talking about the power of words, what was I just doing? And I didn't even realize what I was doing. I was
Mhm.
publicly expressing gratitude and love for my body and the amazing thing that it is, right? And so I'm giving power out by using those words, and I feel calmer. I feel more at peace, right? I feel love for my body by saying that. And again, I was just trying to explain what was happening. I wasn't even planning, but there's I guess a real life example of how the power of the words that you can use actually do have an impact on us.
Right. Well, and then just listening to you say that, I started feeling more peace, and so not only did it help you, but then I felt that power come to me. So yeah, just shows how powerful that is. Um, Um, so the other thing that's been kind of going through my head along with this is, and we kind of touched upon a little bit earlier about things not to say to yourself, because there's a lot of things that have a negative impact on us. So one of the words that I kind of rail against, and I actually wrote about this earlier this week, is the word should. As in like I should do this. Oh, I should know that, or whatever, should something. Because when we say the word should, we are talking about some sort of an expectation and that we're not meeting. And normally that expectation is actually the expectation of someone else, either the expectation that someone else has for us or the expectation that we think that they have for us, even though they may not have said it. We just in our heads have going through this, based on our fears and things, that, oh, well, must be what they expect of us, what they want us to do or to have or whatnot. And so by saying I should do this, we are essentially allowing what we think other people want us to have or want us to do. We're using that to control what we actually do, as opposed to listening to ourselves and doing what we actually want to do, or what feels right to us, or what messages that we're getting, what they're telling us to do, and things. And so that's one of those words that, along with don't, or I can't, is another phrase. I can't do this. I tell my daughter all the time when she says I can't do this. Well, not with that attitude. You can't. You know, because she's putting in her head that she can't do that. And when she believes that she can't do that, then surprise, surprise, she can't do it.
I think there's the old Henry Ford. I think he was accredited with the quote, right? Whether you think you can or think you
Mhm.
can't, you're right.
Exactly.
And should is an interesting word too, because I've heard people say, don't shit all over yourself, which I which I think is pretty fun. But you you brought up about the kind of all of the external expectations around should, right? Like, a lot of the structures that tell you, oh, Brad, you're an attorney, so you should do this, right? You shouldn't do that because that's
Yep.
what attorneys do or what they don't do, right? So
Right.
there are these external expectations, but too, as you were talking about it, I was thinking, another word for expectation is kind of judgment, right? And so in a way,
They're related. Yeah.
every time we're telling ourselves, I should have done that,
Mhm.
I should do this, right? In a way, probably, without even realizing it, we're kind of judging ourselves. We're placing judgment
Mhm.
on ourselves. And so we're doing the opposite, right? We're telling our body, we're telling ourself, we're telling our being, our higher self, that there's something wrong with us because we should have done something different, right? And again, it's kind of a fine line because obviously we want to improve,
Mhm.
but can we also have grace and compassion for ourselves if we're doing the best we can, right? And again, there's a difference, right? If you're doing the best you can every day, right? Like if you go back to the four agreements book, one of those is kind of do your best every day, right? As kind of one of the codes to live by. Well, if you're doing your best every day, then that's all you need to do. If you're not doing your best, right, then maybe that word should come should come in there. How many times can we say should in the same word, right? In the same sentence.
Mhm.
But if we're doing the best we can, then that's when we deserve some compassion, uh, and grace for what we're able to accomplish. And again, that's not to take away from wanting to improve, because again, every day we want to do better, because when you know better, you do better, right? That's one of the things we used to tell our kids when they were little. When you know better, you do better, right? So once you've learned something, then okay, well, I'm not going to do that again, right? And again, sometimes it's not the first time, but that's where the practice and kind of going through comes in, is that we get better every day. We get better the more that we do it. And so I think that's another thing, we've been talking about words. Hey, I used to use the word don't, can't, should, shouldn't all the time, right? I'm working on that to not include those words, to say things that are more empowering, right? Instead of saying, I'll worry about that later, to start saying, it is already taken care of. Now, it's a habit that I've got to break, right? It's a practice that I've got to do every day. And I'm not going to beat myself up if I accidentally say it the other way. But hopefully, I will catch myself in the middle of saying it or thinking that I'm going to say it, stop myself, and put out better words.
Yeah. No, and that's just, I mean, that really encapsulates the whole thing about the spiritual path, about the spiritual journey, is being okay, I guess, for a lack of a better word, okay with where you are, what you're doing. As long as you're doing your best, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are. We've talked about everyone kind of being in a different place on the journey, you know. As long as you're doing your best where you are, that's awesome. Like, it doesn't mean you want to not improve. Sure, you want to get better, you want to, advance, you want to grow, you want to evolve or whatnot, but um still being grateful, being appreciative of what you have accomplished, what you've done to get to where you are today. Um, I think
Well,
it's really important.
and I think too, kind of going back to that word should, because you were talking about those expectations.
Mhm.
And I see a lot of people that are kind of going down a path, going down the path, being hard on themselves and using words like should because they're comparing themselves
Yep.
to someone else, right? And one of my mentors just used an example of palm trees versus oak trees, and said, which one of those is stronger? Most people would say the oak tree is strong. Nope. The palm tree is much stronger than the oak tree, because the palm tree has the ability to bend in a hurricane and come back up, or kneel and come back up. The oak does not. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the oak tree. Doesn't mean that the palm tree is better than the oak tree, but they're two different trees, right? So imagine if the palm tree was sitting there saying, I wish I had acorns. Gosh darn it. I'm not a real tree because I don't have acorns. That would be silly, right? That'd be silly. The same thing. I mean, the I don't know, the oak tree saying, oh, I really like those fronds. I don't know. It's like
The coconuts.
the coconut. I want coconuts.
I was a big coconuts.
I don't need no acorns. I want coconuts or dates, right? Depending on the kind of palm that it is. But allow the oak tree to be the oak tree. Allow the palm to be the palm tree. And don't try to compare the two, right? So the same thing. I mean, Brad and I are similar in a lot of ways. We're different in other ways, right? I would never expect Brad to be just like me. I don't want him to do that. That wouldn't be right. Right? Brad needs to be Brad. I need to be me. Right? And the more that we can come to know ourselves and to give ourselves compassion wherever we're at on the path, right? Because this is one thing that I'll throw out there that a lot of people don't realize is there are a lot of very gifted people in this world who can see things, who can do certain things, but they're not that spiritually evolved. So don't believe that you have to be like somebody else in order to be evolved. You just have to do it your way. Do it the way that works for you in the path where you actually are. Because a lot of these outside things that people see don't matter. It's what's inside that matters, and the progress that you're making inside. Because a lot of the people that are sharing these things are doing it from a place of ego. Oh, look at me. Look at what I can do. The minute you step into that, right? That goes back to what we were talking about before from the power of intention, right? So, not comparing ourselves to other people, I think, is important too when it comes to the power of words, because a lot of times people will get into things like gossip or talking about other people or shitting on themselves because they're not as far along in what they consider to be advanced or evolved as other people. Those aren't words that we want to use, right? Those are discussions that we don't want to be a part of. I mean, anytime that a conversation moves into things like gossip and judgment of other people, you probably want to remove yourself from that conversation, because the toxicity in those kind of conversations and the kind of energy that's being spewed out there in those words is very, very toxic, right? Though another thing with words, because again, people like to bitch and moan and gossip, and again, I'm not telling you what to do. If you want to do it, go do it, fine, but you do what you're going to do, and I'm just going to excuse myself from those situations, or I sit there silently and beam love to people instead of engaging. So
A lot of words.
Who knows where there's a lot of words in there.
Yeah, but no, it's important to just be aware of what you're doing, of what you're saying to others, to yourself. I mean, that's really the biggest thing for me, is just, what do I say to myself What do I, internalize in my thoughts about myself? Because like you said, even though, we think of words as what we say out loud, the things that we speak, or maybe even write, the things that are kind of external to us, we're thinking in words, and those words, they've got power there too. um and even just some of those thoughts that, thinking about, oh, I should have done that, or I should have done this, for instance, can have a big impact.
Yeah, because our thoughts are words as well.
Mhm.
Yep.
And our breath apparently is clean by sound. So the things you learn on this podcast.
Woo! Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Well,
again, don't believe me. No, I don't want anybody to believe me. But like I said, for me, I got a knowing from that. So for me, it works. If it doesn't, that's fine. Right.
it's the truth for you, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, because you create your reality. And your
Words.
reality is whatever is linked to the words that you use, and your reality can be whatever you speak into action. Yep.
It sounds like you have to be part 2 to this. Talk. What do you want your world to be, and how do you create your world the way you want it? By using your words, by using your intention, by using your attention, what you're placing your attention on.
Yep. Yeah, that's a whole nother episode. We'll have to get to that one eventually too.
We're never going to run out of topics here, guys. So like, that being said, if there's something particularly you want to hear from us, let us know. And we'll see what we can do on that. But all right, well, I've kind of run out of words, so I'm gonna hunt over to you if there's anything else you want to say on this topic.
No, I think that's good for today, because like you said, I mean, there are power in words, and again, I mean, don't beat yourself up over it. Just start becoming aware of the words that you're thinking, the words that you're saying, the words that you're hearing as well, right? And just start to do better each day. Just start to change and use better words that will be more effective and more powerful in helping you to get what you want. Right. And again, this is one of those practices, it ain't ever going to end. Okay. You're going to be doing this the whole time that you are on this planet. It will get easier, right? It'll get easier the more you do it. But this is part of our human experience here, is to kind of control that monkey chatter, control what comes out of our mouth, and do it really with an intention and thought to what we're actually creating or destroying by the power of the words that we're actually using.
There you go.
There you go. And that's a wrap for this episode. Hey, and to throw in a little Canadian thing there. Hey.
Hey. We apologize to all our Canadian listeners. We're not trying to make fun of you. We're not.
No. I like that. I'd try to incorporate that in because I actually like it. So myself. Anyway.
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have more fun things to say next time. So catch us then.
All right. See you later, guys.